Yeah, and I just want to say I really appreciate. I mean, I'm happy that you like appreciated my book and my work because it's the very thing that's healing me. You know, finding my creative expression.
Yeah, and being seen.
Yeah, being seen, and I'm really lucky in that I'm getting, you know, my work is getting out to the point where it's really being read and seen and appreciated. It's helping a lot of people. Like I get emails every day of people really getting benefit and it's getting me more in touch with myself and healing because it's been like this lifelong, as you can relate, this lifelong process of almost like it's like a shaman that's getting pulled into the underworld, and are you just going to become like destroyed and you know disabled or like totally fucked up or what? You know, and I've been able to just kind of whatever it just go through my process in a way that I've been able to like more turn it into something helpful.
Right, like a metamorphosis.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and your decision to create this art, which is what it is, and to make it public is such a gift that this is just the way it works. Is that if you're just constantly giving like that, you're going to be able to. It's going to heal you.
Yeah,
it's going to.
Yeah, sure. And it's great that we're making a connection because I go down to Berkeley every.
Oh, nice.
So you're down. You guys are both down in the Bay Area.
Yeah, you can come over.
Because that's where my publisher is, but also I have friends down there, and like one of my teachers is down there, and. And sometimes I imagine, now that the book is out, it's like, maybe next time I go down, we'll try to set up some sort of event about the book.
That would be great.
Because it's such a vortex of people who the book would speak to.
They definitely need it down there.
Yeah, they need it. And what we've been a lot of times doing is, because we've sort of found the same things you're finding contemporaneously, and we're looking for ways to speak the same thing you're speaking, but just with a different voice, because the more ways it can be spoken and told is it. You try to do this in your book over and over again. You basically say, here's an explanation for you, and then here's another explanation for you, and here's another, to try to penetrate different levels, to try to make it really go through. So I just think that these conversations, are just very important because it just helps us flesh it all out.
Yeah.
Because it has to become real. I mean,
it goes from like you said, from the intellectual more to because like what I'm talking about isn't just like an idea or an intellectual thing.
We understand.
It's something that I literally experienced in the non-local field in Mexico in my family system.
Right.
How the whole system was configuring to protect my father. And I was taking notes and drawing maps of what was happening, and that's when I began to realize, wow, there's something deeper going on here.
Right.
And the thing for me, which is really cool, is the idea of actually connecting with other people who are also turned on, and we all have these gifts, and how we can, conspire to co-inspire or activate each other's, collective genius or whatever you call it, in a way where we all get fed.
Right. Yeah, so we came to the same conclusion. We were talking about it as a virus.
Right.
And we've been calling it the virus before he hooked into your book.
That's so funny. Because
so
it's a perfect metaphor.
Yeah.
And we were looking at I was buying biology books, just sort of not sure why I was doing it, and then I saw this BBC documentary called The Hidden Life of the Cell. And it's a 3D animation type thing, and it basically shows you exactly how a virus gets into the body and penetrates the membrane of the cell and tricks all of the different sentinels or the different protection mechanisms. What a virus does is the only things that can get into the membrane of the cell are proteins that have little key codes on the outside of them, little shapes that the membrane recognizes. And there's these little robots that go around and go, okay, that one's good, you can enter. And the virus puts on a fake, skeleton key-like shapes. It takes broken pieces of proteins, puts it on its body so that it can trick the membrane so that it can get in. And so it disguises itself as a friendly.
That's really interesting.
And then it gets in. And when it finally gets in and goes through these different levels of protection, it gets into the center of the cell, and then it just it changes the DNA to make the center of the cell, the nucleus, hospitable to itself.
Could you let me just ask you something? So, is there like a particular like article or a book that describes that what you were just saying? Just exactly that process. Because that's I talk about that a little bit, and I tried to study as much as I'm not like a scientist or anything, but I tried to like understand what viruses and how they work.
I'll send you the link.
Just that, send me the link. That
the BBC documentary is amazing. It's very helpful.
Right.
And then so once it gets in there, then it multiplies by 10,000 times, and then 10,000 of these guys get out and they keep doing it over and over again.
Right.
But it's like we're seeing how it's like. I mean, what you're describing is the way this mechanism works in the you guys, you understand?
You are ready for it?
Yeah. Hold on one second.
Yeah.
Sure. So I would like to get the tofu with black mushroom and tomatoes.
Steamed
rice, fried rice?
Operates in the universe.
Yeah.
And the three of us, we're going to get 3 orders of sizzling rice soup. And the 2 of us want chicken and vegetables.
Right.
And he'll have chicken and shrimp and vegetables. So one of them with,
Well, just regular. Another 2 is just no shrimp.
Right, exactly.
No shrimp.
And then also not to put the sizzling rice. We'll put it on the side for
on the
everyone.
side,
Sure,
that's good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So 2 no shrimp, 1 regular.
Right.
Sicilian rice, that's fine. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
So what he's
Holons.
So we realize
Yeah, for sure.
For every holon, it seems like there is a mechanism that's foundational to it to destroy it. Mm-hmm. Right? And like on the biological level, we know about bacteriophages of these viruses or whatever. On the mind level, it's Wetiko, and it seems like there's one for every. It's fundamental.
I think you got into that a little bit with the Kabbalah, as far as that
the Kelly
essay,
pots,
the Kelly pots, and how
pots,
and how that operated in the universe. That you're always having the conscious evolutionary force at the same time that you're having the destructive force. It's like
it's almost like those two come together, like you were saying, that as soon as any form of like life arises, there's like a counter force, and that seems to potentially serve the evolutionary process or destroy life.
Right.
And I was thinking about, if you go into the biology of your body or of anything, and you look, let's go down to the cellular level, down to the molecular level, down to the atomic level. The only reason why these things can exist with solidity over long periods is because the integrity of that system is so strong. Like scientists have talked about the DNA strand and how much integrity it has, and it can repair itself, and it can just last for a million years in a piece of rock or whatever. You can pull it out, or just the integrity, the repeatability of these chemical processes and stuff. How can it have so much integrity that the whole cosmological system can be built on level after level after level after level, and if one level is weak, it'll collapse the whole thing? It has to be extreme integrity. The only way you can have extreme integrity is if there's constant stress testing. Something has to constantly challenge that evolution so that it can figure out every way to keep itself alive and stable, strong. And if anything in that system starts to weaken, then it has to be replaced. It has to evolve. Right. And the virus is there to constantly make sure, and to basically, it's almost like a recycling system. Anything that's not functioning, that isn't usable for the integrity of the system, goes back to the source. And this sucker just pulls it out.
And I talk about that in my book. I talk about one way of really understanding like what Wetiko is like. It's like going to the gym, and it helps you to develop the muscles that you need of realization.
That's right.
And
Also, I think of when you talk about how Wetiko, it puts us on.
It puts us on. I really like that phrase.
Just like how we talk about the virus puts on the fake proteins.
That's exactly what
putting us on like a suit of clothes, but also putting us on means fooling us. It's
right.
Like the same. So one of the things, it's a trickster because what I talk about with Wetiko, it shapeshifts and puts on and will assume our form.
That's right.
And all of a sudden we just identify with thinking that that's us.
That's right.
And that's like analogous to what you were describing.
That's right.
You see, that was why I'm so interested in you have that link or something.
and that's where I was going to ask you, maybe, because you might understand the trickster archetype more. It's like, where does... Do you know how does the trickster, like the devil character, how does that relate to the Kali archetype in the Hindu tradition? It's not the same. The devil is a masculine trickster, active masculine trickster, and the Kali is an active feminine trickster.
Yeah, and I'm not, and feel free, because you might know also a lot about this too. But I mean, I just think about Watiko being like a trickster, and it's sort of like, in alchemy they have like, Mercurius is the deity who's like the highest divinity co-joined with like the deepest, darkest evil in one being. It's like a superposed state. It's like quantum, it could, that either of its two polarities could manifest, and it's a function of how you engage with it, how you dream it. And I mean, that's a description of Watiko. That's a description of everything, really. And so I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
Yeah, well, what came up for me, like with Kali, and I'm not as familiar with mythology, but I think of Kali as she wears the skulls around her neck, and she decapitates her lover, and
that's
so
right.
This is like very...
She's a destroyer.
She's a destroyer, and to me, that's not necessarily the same as the Mercurius archetype, because it's more like the satanic archetype, but in the feminine form.
Right.
So like one of the things I think about with Mercurius and Hermes is that you see them represented sometimes as a double-headed figure. There's both like a masculine and feminine head, or sometimes there's like different ways of seeing it, like with Baphomet, where there's like one breast and then one is just a pectoral. So it's a union of masculine and feminine in one. But another way of seeing that is it's the combination of the highest good and the deepest evil in one force. But Jung was talking about this in the book that you lent me the other day. But basically, like the idea of that if you were actually to tear apart those two archetypes, so they were no longer co-joined, and then you would have Christ and Satan.
Right.
And then if you just like isolate Satan or the devil as like this one archetype, and then you made it feminine, and then you applied some of its like its like impetus to the sexual arena, then you would have Kali, who's like she's wearing the skulls of her lovers and is right.
And this is what has been confusing us, because we go, okay, we're back to the most foundational principles, the zero and the one, right? The masculine and the feminine, let's just go back to that and go, okay, so the one is the creative impulse, and then the zero is that foundational potential, the sea of all being.
The receptivity.
And go, okay, so where does Watiko, where does the virus, where does this active destructive principle go into this? And it's like, when I start to look at all the different analogies of the zero and the one and all this, I go, okay, the one is a feel that air pressure.
Yeah, there's like a truck driving.
Truck driving.
Yeah.
Every time I look into it, and I go to the Jungians, or I go to those at Joseph Campbell or whatever, I don't quite see it right. And then we kind of realized she found the tree of death, the Qliphoth. And then we started to realize, okay, so there's the tree of life, and there's all of these active principles of creation, and there's masculine and feminine attributes of those, but then there's a flip side to them. There's a flip side to the, and so we were like, okay, so is there a flip side to the zero and the one? Is there the one, which is a creative process, and then the zero, which is a receptive process, and then a dark side of the receptive process, and a dark side of the active process? And I thought, well, okay, so the dark side of the creator one would be the devil. Well, then what's the dark side of the receptive zero?
Yeah.
Kali.
Which there's a puzzle.
Kali, well, that's one. I had
one form.
I mean, right.
Or the dragon,
one
maybe.
idea would be, because any archetype has it's like bipolar, has two sides.
Okay.
And so, I'm not even saying this isn't even necessarily true,
Right.
but what came up in my mind when you asked that is, well, the feminine is like the shunyata, the emptiness in Buddhism.
Right.
You know, the receptive, the voice.
That's right, the voice.
And you know, and if you see that as being feminine, like it's a maternal, or maybe if you know, maybe the shadow part of that would be like the mother who's like the smothering mother.
Right, right. We talked about
Yeah, no, seriously.
You mentioned that in your book, Smother Love. Yeah. Right. Isn't that in there? Wasn't that yours?
Yeah, that might be. I don't know if I even mentioned.
Oh, okay. No. Maybe I read it in Neil's book actually, because we were. Those are the two books we've been reading lately. Yeah.
Really, we're reading Neil's book. That's great.
I said she read his, and I read yours, and then we were going to flip, you know.
Cool.
But she's been reading parts to me,
and I've been reading
parts
your
to her.
essays.
When we just had lunch the other day, he, you know, he's starting this new, like, sort of like this mystery school or something.
Right.
And he's inviting me to be like one of the people on the faculty. It's really
Oh,
fun.
that's
Very
great.
good.
Yeah, it's just kind of
Very
fun.
good. That's great.
And,
yeah, because it's just really important. Like, okay, it's the Westerners who are just so focused on the creation side and all that, and just the whole unbalanced nature of the current system is to just such a large degree because there's been no cultural context for the shadow. There's no real. I mean, if you just take in the devil, and you go look at how Satan is discussed and dealt with in the Bible, it's very partial explanation and understanding. And you know, you look to the Christ figure and stuff, and it's much more complete. I think it's like it's just really out of their view.
well, I kind of point out in my book, though, that it's like it's not accidental that at the moment that Christ made his, you know, kind of came on the scene, that was the same time that Satan showed up. They showed up simultaneously.
They do.
They're like, in other words, they're part of the same underlying archetype or something, you know.
Yeah.
And she was reading your article on one of your main article on Kabbalah.
Right.
Yeah, the one, right. I wrote one article on Kabbalah. And
Right.
that article is going to be published. You know that magazine? What is it called?
Tikkun?
Tikkun.
Oh,
They're publishing it in the
great.
next issue.
Great.
Kabbalah article.
That's
Nice.
awesome.
And
Yeah.
you talk about, and because we have to really go into the Kabbalah next. I mean, it's like we have to. I mean, basically.
Yeah.
But how that God is both of these potentials. That there is a recognition in that tradition that God is both the creator and the destroyer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that really isn't in the Bible. That clear understanding. I mean, there's a quote right in how did he explain it? How that the recognition of evil being a manifestation of God's powers, and love and creation being a manifestation of God's
Right.
powers, and they're in the deity. They're not. You know what I'm saying? You wrote it in there.
No,
You wrote it in there.
I totally talk about that, for
Yeah.
sure. So I'm curious, so what do you guys do as far as, like,
With shrimp.
shrimp is over there?
So, how to make a living?
Yeah, like that
Yeah.
type of thing. That's one.
We're both musicians.
But that doesn't make a
So is
living.
Ezra,
Yeah.
No living there.
Right.
He was in business for himself. He does recording and mastering.
Oh, okay.
I have worked for Whole Foods as my side job for 15 years. I'm in different jobs within the company. So, and I've lived in a few different parts of the country, just transferred and worked for them. And kind of, I'm definitely, I had cancer at one point, so I spent a whole year just doing a healing and using my body as a guinea pig, and realized that I would have to work on both, you know, physical, emotional, and a spiritual level in order to heal myself. But I did take complete responsibility of it. I didn't look at it as in a victim kind of way.
Did it get?
Yeah, I healed it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It took her a year. Just totally
it took
got rid of it.
I did all kinds of fasts and cleanses. I researched everything myself. Just, you know, and then I also realized you know, there was some books, like I got into Aurobindo and The Mother and The Mind of the Cell. And,
That was kind of like your introduction to dispelling Watiko.
yeah, I mean, I really saw it as part of my experience that I didn't view it as a bad thing. I viewed it as a healing experience.
You want a bowl.
Yeah, thank you. Right.
Right, that's amazing.
Yeah, and so that kind of started my journey, that particular journey, and that's how I initially got a job at Whole Foods, because, it reflected on a health and nutrition level where I was at. But at the same time, I've been an artist and a musician and a songwriter for years, and I've had bands. And,
oh, wow, cool.
And that's how I met Colin.
Mastering her CD or
mastering
something.
the CD about 7 years ago. But our work, and we always got together, and we would just end up, starting with music, and then we would just get into all these very esoteric conversations about reality and life, and then just in January, I was going through kind of a transformative time in my life, and same with him, and then we just started to take some walks, and the reason being is I get very strong. I'm very body sensitive, and I'm like an empath, and I feel things. And when he talked about suggesting taking a walk, I felt this expandedness, an expansive feeling in my body. It was very, very strong, and so I just said, okay, yeah, let's do that. So we started taking a walk up on the hills in January. It was a beautiful winter in the Bay Area. There was barely any rain, and it was just amazing. We were like processing.
Just talking about our own psychological garbage.
What we call garbage, working through all this, and at the same time, we were getting all these downloads about awareness and creativity, and this whole art that we're starting to create now has basically been part of our own awakening, and so we got the analogy of that we were living in a movie in March or so.
Yeah,
March?
so as we started hanging out and going through our own garbage together, just the interaction of two people who are on the exact same level with their progression just exponentially made our own processing go faster. And so we started having physiological reactions, and I mean, we've had really like ecstatic kind of, just very positive body awakenings. And then as we've found Wetiko in our mind hole on, we've had very sort of just nasty purging, type sessions too and stuff.
Yeah.
And integrating like separated parts of ourselves, and it's been very sort of, it's been very rapid.
Very rapid.
And it's like we'll just get together and talk and stuff, and just sort of just stream of consciousness talk, kind of like this or whatever, and it'll just lead us to information that was at one point disparate information that'll kind of get channeled through, and we'll realize, oh, that's exactly what we were looking for. We should go look at that, and then that'll lead us to something, and then we'll find the synchronicities will start. So it's like our talks are like this fuel for the synchronicities, and then the synchronicities fuel the talks, and then that brings us back to our garbage. It's this whole holistic process, and we realize our life is actually becoming a piece of art, a movie, a waking dream.
Like a dream, right? Totally.
And it's like we're hanging out with our friend Rick yesterday and trying to explain to him like our story, and I was just like, these kinds of certain kinds. I'll tell him, these synchronicities happen. I was like, we went to this event and somebody was giving away these coins, and this one has the tree of the flower of life, and says go with the flow, and it's the water coin. And
right so far?
Yeah, really good. Thank you.
I thought,
How do you like
okay,
your finger? Isn't that good? That's good.
well, that's weird. Okay, so go with the flow, and that's what kind of been. My business fell off for like 3 months. I got no clients, and I was like, what's wrong with my flow? what's going on? And at the same time, the water in the building broke, and there's a huge underground leak, and all the water in the building has been out for on and off for 2 months, and the whole flow is blocked. And I grab this, and I'm like, oh, okay, now we have to go with the flow. And what does that mean? And I was showing this to Rick on the table at the restaurant, and the waitress walks up. She says, "Oh, what's that?" And I go, "Oh, it's this coin, blah, blah, blah." She goes, "That's funny." And she pulls down her thing. She's got this huge flower of life tree of life tattoo right there. And I'm like, just to show Rick the dreamlike nature that's unfolding,
right.
I'm like, you see, Rick, this is constant for us now.
We had another experience yesterday. So I had a dream that not last night, but the night before, that I was feeding all these cats. And then the restaurant that Rick brings us to yesterday morning was called the Country Cat, with this big cat in front.
Right.
And then last night we were with another friend, and we got lost.
Lost our car.
We couldn't find our car. And so we kept walking around the blocks, and then we just stood there, and all of a sudden this cat comes up to us, starts purring. I love animals, and we just started petting it, and and we followed him, and the cat actually brought us back to our car. So this
is like we just go, you know what I'm saying, just go on and on with this, and this is like our life together now. It's unfolding like this movie.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, because I totally understand in the sense that that's, I'm right there. I've been having those experiences big time for like decades.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
That's why one of the things that's interesting, and one of the things I'm trying to get across in my work is, and it's an example with you two guys, when you actually connect and hang out with other people who are also open in a certain way. There's a certain field that gets it's like the field gets potentiated to more like invoke the synchronistic matrix to come through.
Yeah.
And that's kind of one way of describing what these groups I have. But that's also what I'm trying to get across in the work, that not just like 2 of us or 12 of us, but all like 7 billion of us can actually like plug into that.
And that's what and the art that's coming through us that seems to be demanding to us to make it, to create it, is based on creating a communication of this information through an artistic outlet, and through music, through this comic book, through a multimedia event or events, and
we're just sort of like letting it come through us in steps. And like right now, it's saying start a comic, so we're investigating comics and stuff.
And then also we're putting together a performance with music, and then also speaking from our personal experience, and then also in a more of a poetic way.
So that sounds very wishy-washy in a way, because it still is. It's still manifesting itself. This is the information we know so far.
You're plugged in, and you're like recognizing which mediums you're going to begin expressing yourself through.
Right.
And then we also started the website livinginthemovie.com. And so in our website, we're documenting what's going on with us through like blogs and essays, and he's writing articles, and then interviews. Audio. Like we met Alex and Allison Gray a few weeks ago, and we wrote he wrote an article, a review of our experience with them and that experience. And like with you, hopefully we'll be able to take our experience with you and put that up too. And so we're just it's just definitely in the beginning stages of this whole thing, but it's taking us on a whole journey that I feel is everything that we've both experienced in our separate lives was there to get us to the point to be able to create this art, is how we're feeling what's going on.
And if I could just add, so to finish the whole, because you're basically explaining to these guys, what our whole thing is,
right?
And just to add to that is that the characters that sort of are coming through, or these which are roughly based on us, are named will and faith.
Right, you mentioned that in the email, yeah.
And so will represents focused intent, and
Also the male principle.
and the male principle,
and
one, and then faith represents the female principle and 0, and that seems very basic, but in a way it's more, because if you take the information, like if you take Paul's information about understanding Wetiko, and if you take this other information, which is now sort of coming out in the New Age movement about how to co-create your reality, and different techniques that people are talking about and stuff like that, we're basically finding like that the technology is to align will with faith. And when we use the word faith, like it doesn't. When we say faith, we don't mean belief so much as we mean a body-based resonance. It's a heart-based resonance.
what you would call compassion, I believe.
You would call compassion. It's total acceptance, ease, and
the heart chakra being activated.
Activated,
fully.
right. And like, in order to show me what that meant is because she's had those kind of experiences all her life, and I've been more in the head. Is that I had this experience about a month and a half ago or whatever, where sort of spontaneously, I had a dream that I was out of the game. I walked into a room, and there was all of these guys like jumping up and down to play this game on this table. There were like 30 of them piled onto each other, putting their bets in and stuff. And I just watched them like, look at this crazy, why do you guys care about this game? And then I just kept on walking, and I found myself in the attic of this building, and I was in this labyrinth, sort of lost. And then I found this attic door going down, and I looked down, and 60 feet below was a basketball game going on, and the ladder led right into the middle of the field. And there was such 60,000 people cheering, and I'm like, I'm not going down there. And it's like showing me how I'm not in the game. And it's, and then after that, for about 5 or 6 days.
But before that, you had the cathartic moving of your garbage with the
I did also have a sort of a reintegration of this split off part of my teenage boy into my current adult man, sort of, and I could tell you another time about how that worked. But after these things happened, like within a few days, I woke up and I had my heart was totally turned on. My whole chest was just hot. And it lasted for about 5-6 days, and it really was on. No, it really turned on in the laundromat. Mm-hmm. It just turned on in the laundromat, and it just stayed on. And then it kind of puttered out after a while, after 5-6 days or something. But during that whole time, I was unable to have any destructive thoughts in my mind. I was unable to think pessimistically at all. I was completely protected from any Wetiko whatsoever. And that was what made me understand the faith side of the equation. And it was just this total acceptance and being in the moment. It was just a walking, it was meditative situation. And I wasn't jumping up for joy and everything's great and kissing people and stuff. It was just this deep, total open heart sort of situation. And that was to show me the sort of faith side of things. And then we go back to the Bible and we start looking at Jesus and how he talks about faith and all this. And we start realizing that, or I go back to Greg Braden, that author, talks about how he went to Tibet and asked these guys, what are you doing with your prayers over and over again? And they're like, by saying this over and over again, we're not just saying something, but we're actually turning on that feeling of what the prayer is in a whole body-based way. And that when the thought and the feeling are aligned, then it actually will manifest the peace that we're trying to start here. Mm-hmm. So that was sort of like the technology. Then we sort of realized you take this whole power of intention and the focused mind and the positive thinking and all that, and you integrate that with an open heart, body-based situation. Now you have an aligned human being that can actually co-create.
Which we actually have a word that we've been using called homobalentia,
right,
which means balance.
Balanced
so
man. Then you have
human.
homobalentia, right,
yeah.
out of that. And so then now my challenge is to continue to try to nurture that heart feeling and to have that in my daily life instead of just as a peak experience.
Right. So,
You know,
well, that's what practice is. I mean,
that's what
why-
practice is, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And then at the same time, what we also realized that as we worked on the garbage, what we call garbage or black bags, or the misplaced trauma, which is easy for Wetiko or the virus to come in, and what we see it as it comes in, if there's a weak part of the psyche,
Yeah, that's how it.
a traumatic part of the psyche,
comes in there
Wetiko,
and-
it will come in and actually latch onto that. And then it will reflect itself in your outer environment. Is what we've
Immediately
noticed.
for us.
Yeah, immediately. So as we have worked and processed through the deeper traumas and really cleared them out, what it does is it opens more space,
More room.
more room for that full heart and body resonance to be activated, and then that reflects out into your experience.
Right. Like if we weren't actually going through and putting the light on the trauma, on the shadow material, and dispelling it and breaking it up and stuff, it would be taking up all this space. And so it clears space, and then through that extra space, then everybody talks about consciousness evolution and all this stuff. You go to Ken Wilber and stuff, he's talking about causal fields and all this kind of stuff. To actually perceive at that level, you can't perceive at that level if you have all of these, like what the Hawaiians call black bags, the trauma, that's sitting there sucking. It's like black holes that are just sucking your spiritual energy into them, feeding Wetiko. It's just sitting there feeding off of this stuff that you haven't looked at or dealt with.
And then you can really see that in our external reality, on a cultural
Right.
level. It's all the negativity and all the stuff that's going on in the world is a reflection of humanity not able or not willing to look or go deep enough on their own internal trauma or
Right.
their own black bags. So part of our work, we feel, is because his music that he's been doing, and he's just been naturally attracted to it years ago. Like his extreme metal is his band, is extreme metal, which deals directly into the shadow, right?
Right.
My personal life has gone completely into the shadow. So it's like we both really understand on a deeper level what that shadow is and have been able to integrate it, or that's what we're doing, is integrating it. And through this we feel that we have insight on like a technique that we're working on to be able to actually help other people to be able to go there and experience it. Because what I've found with pain and having cancer and the whole thing is like it's just blocked energy, and the black bags and the emotional trauma is, again, it's blocked energy. But I have found that physical pain is actually easier to heal than emotional traumatic pain is actually
much harder.
It's harder. That pain, that emotional trauma, is actually a more difficult place to go. And what I see a lot of people doing is they'll get to a certain place in their development, and it's become so intense and so difficult that they'll stop, and they'll just stop at a certain level.
A lot of people. Even people who are really into consciousness studies, or people from the 60s who are taking acid and trying to understand themselves and all that, they start going into their stuff, and then they get to this place that they're just like, that is as far as I'm going. And then they stay in the game. They can't remove themselves and get that separation. They can't actually have a lucid dreaming life because they're stuck at that level. So this whole thing of awakening to the dreamlike nature of the world is absolutely contingent on people's ability and willingness and success in releasing the trauma, in breaking it up, and getting rid of it.
And I believe that
you can't just focus on consciousness evolution, and even you can be a very experienced meditator and still not really get jack crap done in a way in your life. Still be manifesting all sorts of junk. because those black bags, that trauma is just sucking that stuff and attracting that negativity to your life. So
And I
it's
think, like, your work, the reason why you've had challenges with it getting out is because it does reflect something deep in the culture, and it forces people to have to look at that stuff.
It does.
They don't necessarily want to look
They
at
don't
it.
necessarily want to look
like
at
you said,
it.
that bookstore wouldn't carry your book.
Right.
And now they do, and now
Now
I'm not
they
be
do.
working there any day.
Oh, really? Which bookstore
You
is
converted
that?
them.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we don't need to say it on tape, but
Well,
Oh, yeah.
Right. No. But what happened with the bookstore was interesting because we have a mutual friend who's one of the employees there, and
Right.
he really loves my work and loves the book, and was really trying to get it into the store, and we, and was meeting with this great, like, whatever, like, resistance, and then finally, so then what happened is one of like a really well-known author and a shaman, anthropologist, PhD guy, came and was giving like a lecture, and I actually went to the lecture because this guy had been reading my book and just was loving it also.
Right.
And during the lecture at the store, he kept on bringing up my book and kept on mentioning. And so after the talk, all these people came up to me in the middle of the bookstore going, how can we get your book? And I was like, you can get it anywhere in the whole universe except for here. And so basically the way things played out is that within the week or so they decided, because they were getting all these special orders for my book, and then they decided to carry it.
right, good.
But then what happened, I heard from our friend who works there, that the owners have a daughter who later that next week had a nightmare, and the nightmare was that somebody had broken into the store. Right, I told you this, right? And they were like these burglars, and they were robbing the store. And then our friend who works there, in her dream, came up to her and said, talking about the robbery, going, that's Watico. And so it was actually had come into their daughter's,
Wow.
into her dreaming process.
Wow.
And so, but the thing I wanted to reflect back to you, just like as we were sitting here, is it's clear, like, you are such a reflection. I think you remind me of a part of like myself a little while ago, a few years ago, in the sense that based on your own experience, you're having these realizations, these insights, these dots are connecting, stuff is like more and more getting in focus, and of course there's the impulse to want to share that.
Right.
And actually the act of sharing it, creatively expressing it, like you're doing here today, is the very, in a way, like this, it's like the medium of the vehicle which you even more integrated deep in your realization.
Yeah, telling the story helps to us to understand it.
Right. And so the thing I was struck by as you were sharing is, what you guys should do is, and this is what you're doing, I think, with the comic books or with whatever, but my medium was like, I just wrote a book, and not that you need to write a book,
right?
But I was like having the same thoughts about, because everything you're saying, I'm like, I'm happy
you're
to
there.
hold space, but I'm like, yeah, totally, and but so I just want to encourage you, because it felt like there was like this archetype of like the teacher coming through you,
right?
But it wasn't it was like slightly unconscious. And what I mean by that is that instead of me wanting to say, you should not be doing that, I wanted you to do that more, even amplified. I wanted you to step into that teacher and more do it, whether it's like making the comic or making the game thing or the website or like write a book or something, but because it feels like that there's something that's coming through you, that's wanting to come through you, that you're not fully being conscious of, and then it's happening unconsciously. What I mean by that is that, I was totally happy that was really cool for me to hear your story and all this, but it also could feel like at certain points I was asking myself, well, who are they talking to? Because it felt like you were talking to, because I do this all the time. I'll be like talking to somebody, but in one way I'm actually talking to an inner figure inside my own head.
I see.
So I began wondering, wow, it's like they're teaching someone. I wonder who they're teaching, oh, they're teachers. They should just fully step into that instead of doing it unconsciously.
Right.
So I'm wondering if you relate to what I'm saying at all.
Wow.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Yeah, totally.
But I felt also like, oh, this reminds me of like a podcast where there's like, there's a group called Project Camelot.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Right.
And I've experienced them do this where they'll like host different, speakers and whatnot. And then as they're like interviewing the person, the woman who hosts the show, she'll be speaking for like 80% of the time. And it's like interesting because I'm like, oh yeah, it's like,
that's the same effect.
yeah, it's just like a similar constellation.
Right.
And yeah, like to me, I mean, I was totally interested and on board with everything you're sharing.
Right.
So it's like, I have no resistance to it. It was just I could see what you're referring to.
Right.
We wanted to. We wrote down things. I sent you things so we might talk about and stuff like that. But it's kind of. We thought we kind of just went to the coffee shop this morning and we kind of just talked about this and typed some stuff out. We're like, the best thing to do is just tell them our story, and then that will provide this context, and then further conversation can more appropriately erupt from there. But about the teacher thing, we've been looking at Neil Kramer a little bit and going, look on his website. It says Neil Kramer, philosopher and teacher.
Right.
And we thought, wow, that's very bold.
Courageous.
But he is a philosopher and a teacher, and he is living in. It seems like he's gone through trouble moving into this, but it seems like he is in that. He is living that player piece, that character.
Totally.
He's doing it, and he's moved into it, and he feels comfortable with it. And we thought, okay, how does it feel? I mean, just look at that example of someone who just right out in front just says, here's what it is. Here's what I'm living. Right there, doesn't beat around the bush and just puts it right out there and puts it bold and clear. That shows you his comfort with it.
Yeah, for sure.
And so and that
too,
struck
because,
something in us
right.
because there's not as much comfort in me.
Sure.
As
No,
he
it's
has.
edgy. It's edgy. When I first began giving, my first, talks and workshops, I remember it was in 93 or something, right around then. And I remember it was really edgy, like I took out like full-page ads and I was putting up posters all over town. Because when you're giving talks like that, you're basically saying that you you have something that you know.
Right.
And that's what I mean. It was like going over an edge.
Yeah.
But I want to say, like with Neil, I think it's fantastic what he's doing. And I want to say I have my own. You have to have your own way of doing it. And
right.
I just wanted to share. I have a particular way.
Please tell.
Sharing. My whatever, like the Dharma, my Dharma.
Yeah.
And that is, as Ezra will readily attest. I openly in the groups. Oh, and I'm hoping that soup is good for you. It's
so good.
Yeah, I thought
so
it would be
good.
good.
So good.
Yeah.
It's perfect. It's the right
that's what I
recipe
thought.
for what I need. Yeah,
Totally.
it's perfect. Yeah.
And so, what I do, for example, in the groups or when even in my private practice or anybody who I get to know, I openly share my struggles and my shadow.
Right.
And the groups, I allow myself to get triggered, to fall into my unconscious. And when I'm in my unconscious, I can't facilitate, and somebody else facilitates because it's just a role in the field that one facilitates. So it's not at all like I'm like just sort of identified or like I'm the only one. I'm the one who's like has a monopoly on the teacher.
I can tell.
No, you're
very open about it, and the way you just invite people.
Flower of life.
Yeah, that's a message for you.
Flower of life. It's go with
it says go with the flow.
Oh. Yeah, it's not American though. It's
Oh, okay. So interesting.
Yeah. That and $1 will get you a cup of coffee.
But no, please go ahead.
Yeah, and so basically, and Ezra, I'm happy if you wanted to in any way add.
Rice.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I always thought that I could tell like the way you put out your teaching is I could always tell it's in a very it's from a standpoint of saying here I am facilitating this for you, but let's do this in a co-creative way. Let's do this together. You've always had it from that point of view.
I'm not like
on a pedestal. You're not.
I have these teachers who are some of the greatest of the enlightened teachers from Tibet and Burma. And yeah, they don't even at all put themselves off as they're enlightened, even though I totally experience them as being enlightened.
Right.
But for me, it would be ridiculous if I were to put myself off as enlightened, because I'm totally a work in progress, like all of us. I'm working out my stuff, and I'm healing my shadow and my unconsciousness. And at first when I began doing my work, some people got really upset that I wasn't like this fully enlightened person, and because they wanted the person in the role of leader to be like all enlightened. But thankfully, I've been able to attract people who really appreciate that I'm just like being this human being who's being just honest and all that. And I wonder anything you want to say, because you've seen me do this again and again. I mean, I don't know if you want to add any comment to that or not.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like the way that you're describing yourself is true. It's my experience with you, and the group dynamics are really interesting because you have people that are meeting together every week. Like anywhere from like 8 to 12 people,
right? And
so you get to know each other really well. And it could be that for one group, like there's like 1 or 2 people that are really we're going all the way into that and exploring what's going on for them. And the next week it could be somebody totally different. It could be that we're just having light chit chat one week, or every single dream. It's a dream, and that's the thing is you don't have some like prescribed method or technique. There's no agenda. You're just sitting down, you're hanging out, and whatever.
And somebody just was in the group, and she just started, and she was a therapist who just dropped out after a month because she had these ideas of what the group should look like. Instead of she just really wasn't, at least from my opinion, switched on to that. Well, wait, if this is a dream, we're like co-dreaming this every moment, and it's really open-ended.
Right.
And Paul does, I mean, you do play the role of facilitator, so it's not as if you're just like this absent, absent from that role, but you also, how perfect that a facilitator would be capable of, unfacilitating in order to allow other people to pick up the role and let them step into their own,
it's beautiful.
their own dharma.
And I feel like I do the best job of facilitating when it's not even seen that I'm facilitating, when I'm and then what will happen when you have groups that you have a lot of eldership people in the groups for over 15 years or just years and years, and maybe the average tenure of each person might be 7 years in the group. Then the group just facilitates itself. It's like that's a really in phase, this dreaming circle, where it's a container that it just it's a self sustaining organism in a way. Yeah. I don't even have to do anything at that point.
Oh.
I'm curious of what you get out of the group every week. How do you use that in the rest of the time in your life?
No, that's a great question. And for me, it's activating my stuff.
Right.
And I'll get triggered, and then it'll be like, oh, great, now all week I get to work on what's been activated in me.
Right.
Oh, okay, because the other people's communication triggers. It will trigger.
Oh, it'll trigger. We all get triggered in different ways. It's exactly what you were talking about, about having that trauma.
Yeah, that's
and if that trauma isn't, if you don't shed light on it, then it just kind of, becomes calcified, and then, draws your psychic energy, and then becomes, the breeding ground for Watiko.
Right.
So the idea, in the group, if we bring somebody new in and that person is going to trigger other people, they're going to be excited. They're going to be fantastic. Because the training is that if we get triggered, to look at what's getting touched on us, instead of, oh, they're triggering me, they're the problem. If only they would change, I'd feel better.
Right. Like the woman that came in for a month and left, that was a trigger.
That was a trigger for all of us, but it was also, what was triggering us was that every week she was coming back and having this judgment on the group. So,
and saying, yes, she's thinking of leaving the group. And so at one point, her last group, Ezra got dreamed up to, in a really forceful way, to just say, you should leave this group, get out of here.
Well, I said, get the fuck out.
Totally right. Yeah, it was beautiful. And you were kind of scared that I was going to be upset with you, and I was really happy, because it was a voice that was in the field. It was hanging in the air.
Right.
Well, she was asking, she was basically fishing for that reaction.
She was. I totally, and there were so many people who, for the very first time that she ever sat, and it was 4 or 5 weeks, that every time as soon as she really came out with her voice, it was always the same one, which is, I'm not sure if this is for me. I've been in another group before that was kind of similar but different, and I like that better, and I'm not sure, And it was but she wasn't even picking up on what was happening. She was just having this comparison thing in her own mind.
She was running a reel. That's what she says to every group.
Right. And she had even said to you later that other people, when I shared that's a recurring process for me. Other people have been able to hold that better. But for me, it wasn't that I wasn't able to hold it. It was that actually the way that I chose to hold it wasn't to just pamper her and just let her like play out this thing perpetually. I picked up the role that's like, oh yeah, you're going to just keep picking this up, week after week. I'm going to allow myself to give voice to this. And what Paul reflected when I said that was like, yeah, but can you also see how by her sharing this week after week, eventually something could get unlocked and it could like totally transform her whole process. And I said, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And that was the thing, is that I wasn't one-sidedly identified with get the fuck out, but that was a real energy in me. That was a real voice, and I allowed myself to say that, which how many, in a lot of, like, think of like with coworkers, you can't say that. You can't say that to your boss. You can't really say that to your friends or family, unless with your friends and family you have like a real solid container. And most of us don't even know what that means or what that looks like. So it's like, I really feel like you're like sort of way showing, or just like, you're holding a certain kind of field where then also on, once a month there's like these open groups where people can come in and check it out. And so then, there's people who are regulars and other people who are new, and people can get a taste of that and can actually go and begin to practice that in their own lives. So it's a real service to the community.
And it's really bringing people together and showing, there's a way of us hanging out. I mean, even the four of us this is an Awakening in the Dream group, but there's a way of just bringing people together and being present with no agenda except just to inquire into their experience together that can actually really help us to wake up and stimulate our lucidity. And it's not any fabricated, forced, it's totally this organic thing, way of being together. And it's the way I'm healing myself. So that's what's really cool.
Yeah, that's
it's perfect. It's perfect. It's what needs to be done. And that's why it's happening. Yeah.
Do you find that, like the rest of your life, like your coworkers, or like how that was kind of my question, is like when you go into your day-to-day world, how is being in the group reflecting into that?
It's a really relevant question. It's a good one. But what it is, there's such like a sense of family and understanding and compassion for one another that develops in the groups, that you begin, especially if you're like week after week for years, you start to feel like this is normal. It normalizes intimacy.
Oh, great. Right.
But the shadow side of that is that then you potentially forget, especially if you hang out with your friends and like you start to create containers with your friends. And so your friends and your family, like I've totally healed like my process with my mother and my father through this work.
Excellent.
I'm not fully healed, but like now I'm not like, there was like years we weren't talking, and now I talk to them on the regular, and we have beautiful conversations, very loving. No, it's not draining. It can be draining if I like go into certain configurations because it's not fully healed.
Right.
But there's a general sense of having a container with them.
Right.
But the thing is, like, I was working at this place for 3 months in the Northwest here in Portland, and it's a healing center, and it's, they have like, certain healing, like there's massage therapists and acupuncturists and this special technique they have there. And so I was working there, and one of my coworkers, she'd worked at spas before, so she was more like the athletic, spa-oriented type of person, but not so much like the dreaming, like psychoactive component, right? So what happened is that I was working with her the most, and she was a manager like above me. She wasn't the boss, but she was the manager. And what happened is at first we had these really beautiful conversations, but then she reached one of her edges, one of her walls. But there basically she was like, I come to work. I don't come to work to process. And she created this wall, and I talked to my boss, and I was like, well, what's going on? Like, how can I creatively work with this so that I'm not feeling all shut down and repressed, like I can't just be myself.
Right, exactly.
And what the reflection I got was, Ezra, she feels that you're too empathic. And then my boss's reflection was, we'll try to work on this, but in the meantime, we need you to turn down the empathy.
That's funny.
Which is like, what an interesting thing.
Yeah.
And what I ended up getting fired about a month and a half later, which is just a couple weeks ago. And what they said was that I did what she asked. I stopped trying to relate empathically with my coworker and would just clean and communicate on very basic, like surface level stuff. But then I got an email from somebody who was like needing basically an empathic signal, an empathic response. The title of it was "Our Float Tank's Scary," because it's like a float tank shop.
Our float tank what?
Our float tank's scary.
Oh, float tanks.
Right. It's a sensory deprivation tank center.
Right. Oh, so, it is. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so,
oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's this place where like people come in and they're scared, and you have to talk with them and like help them feel more comfortable and to open up. And so it's by nature you would expect like an empathic field to be like conjured.
Yeah.
And yet like this woman, her like main criticism is I'm too empathic. So what happened was I got this email, and I was like in the like turn down the empathy scene, And then so I wrote back and I go, not really, like nothing to worry about. Like I just didn't like cater to the fact that she had this
right.
issue going on. And so then the boss, even without having given me any protocol, just ended up basically telling me this is an inappropriate way to respond to a customer. You know, combined with your conflict with your coworker, you're fired. And it's like, wow, so
they already had it.
Right. It was like they and right. It was just
so
interesting.
Basically, one simple way of translating that is so you weren't able to sort of like create like the container in your workplace for you to just like continue your unfoldment of your process. And so yeah, you have to be skilled, because the thing with the groups, it really is like, kind of a special place where we are all creating a new consensus, i.e. this is a dream and you're a dream character, we're dreaming up whatever's happening together and, blah, blah, blah. And the idea of being able to take that into the world, it's you have to be skillful.
Yeah, and I totally confess to that like I lack the skillfulness to be able to like be with this woman in a way that was accessible enough for her to be able to relate to me and to be able to like if she would come in, she'd had like these stomach cramps and she'd be like, she's a very beautiful athletic woman and everything, but she had like internally she had all this pain and suffering. So I'd be like, oh, what's going on for you? And she'd start telling me about her stuff, and I think what happened is that as she started sharing, she realized now she'd exposed it, which probably catalyzed some healing processes. But then instead of like staying with that with me, for some reason she stopped, and I didn't actually have the like knowledge or wisdom or understanding of like how to navigate that with her to like come to a place where we could continue to do that healing.
And maybe she just wasn't ready for it, and that's probably what it was, is that maybe that whole environment wasn't ready for that deep work.
The whole environment, because if she were to go that far and take on this new responsibility, this role as to heal herself there and to go into that shadow material and give permission to that process, then you've already given permission. Now she'll be giving permission. Now everybody else in the workplace will have to give will be threatened that they might have to give permission to vent this or to process this. And then everybody collectively just said, they all conspired because they were all too afraid to go as far as where you were going or where you were helping her go. And they just said, shut this down right now.
I was like a virus. Which is the very thing I was actually attempting to dispel by going into it. I was perceiving the virus, and so I became the virus by perceiving it, by putting words on it.
At least in their eyes.
In their eyes, but actually in a way they were allowing the virus to kind of, because really what you were was a novel evolutionary force into their environment to help with the healing process. But they were working on their shadow stuff.
And this is total Wetiko. I talked about in the book that the Wetiko virus fancies itself to be the healing antibody, and it actually sees the actual healing antibodies as like toxins to be eliminated.
When you said that in the book, I thought of how the scene in The Matrix where Agent Smith says humanity is like a virus, a plague upon this earth. Then Agent Smith, to me, represents the machine, of culture or whatever. He is the virus. He sees it. Or we were watching Star Wars, the third one or whatever. Emperor Palpatine, or the congressman, the politician, goes to Anakin and says, I see the Jedi Council or whatever as a corrupted council that's trying to assume power, and you can't listen to them. They're actually the compassionate ones that are trying to heal the universe. But this guy who's loaded with Wetiko, a total vessel, he sees the Jedi Council as an evil force. So this is exactly how it is.
Yeah, totally.
So actually, I have found that because I work in a grocery store, right? And for years, it's been the best teacher for me on how to flow and to operate and keep this overall very harmonious state within absolute chaos. And then at the same time, I have to operate and I have to deal with all these different people with all these different layers of garbage and Wetiko entering people, and it's just been a really good exercise. But what you find after a while is that you're able to still be in this evolutionary field, the new balanced human. You're able to stay in that and see another human that may not be quite where you're at, or just not wanting to deal with it, and you can kind of operate with them as in kind of like a dance, where if they try to start bringing in that negativity or trying to attack
Trigger you,
it's almost like with that heart, it just turns it around. It can't penetrate. But it's
like Jason's father. He told us about his father, who operates a furniture store, and how people come in because he is such a peaceful man and really has something mastered to where they'll come in just, oh, this is broken and you guys suck and blah, blah, blah. And he says everybody that walks out of that furniture store walks out laughing or happy or whatever. He just converts them through his vibe.
Yeah, so it's definitely it's a challenge, and I think maybe perhaps it's just part of your growing experience to see how that operates. In an environment.
No, it's a perfect experience.
Yeah.
It's a perfect experience.
You're so blessed.
Yeah.
It really is. It showed you where safe and unsafe boundaries are when you go out into this field and stuff where not everybody is at your level, and showed you how, that you have to do it with care and caution.
Right.
And,
we've just had these experiences just on this trip where if we start getting in a disharmonious state, like crazy things start happening.
No, we got sucked in. We got triggered and sucked in, and we usually when we get sucked in, when we fall into the game and become unconscious, we usually within 3 or 4 minutes see it and go, okay, turn that off. Okay, that's out of here. We're not going to do that. But this time we got sucked in for like 30 minutes or something, and we had a blowout on the highway. And so
this was on a rental car.
In a rental car, and so it's just like we can't get away with crap anymore now. It just happens.
Yeah,
like
this
that.
woman, because I will actually take. I'm very sensitive, and we've had some experiences where I've realized that actually Wetiko can transfer into and actually come into me, almost like in a shamanic kind of a way, and I have to exorcise it. I have to literally realize what's going on, or
right,
he
like if you go around
out.
somebody who's absolutely infected and they're just spitting
If
this
I'm
virus
not,
everywhere,
completely
it
harmonious,
can totally just change your mood.
The thing is, no, it's contagious, and it's also like a non-local thing. That if this is a dream, and when you establish yourself in that viewpoint, and if you come and somebody at that moment is channeling Wetiko, well, they're a dream character of yours. They're the part of you.
Exactly.
So, and then you see, that's the thing about, it's similar to that, like if you see like this evil, or like you see the unconscious, if like in the groups, you say if somebody's totally like acting out their unconscious, we all get triggered. We get into our unconscious. It's non-local.
I see what you mean.
And so you can't see the evil out there without having some this resonant part of yourself that's evil get activated. You can't see the unconscious without a similar part and you get activated. Same thing with Wetiko. You can't see it out there without it touching that similar part in you.
Yeah.
But then it's all a question, what do you do with that? Do you then act it out, which is then your carrier at that moment? Or do you okay, now I have an opportunity to metabolize what's gotten activated in me.
Right.
It's an opportunity, it's a gift for me to even more deepen my understanding. And then once you assimilate it, then you could actually be a benefit.
Right.
Yeah, because it forces you to be more of a watcher.
Yeah,
right?
but more of a watcher, but also a full participant in your own inner process. So it's both simultaneously.
And then also, I think that image that came out, it was in one of your recent essays, where you talk about this entity that the transference with your father.
Well, that was a dream I had, I think, or something, or
yeah, I thought that you had written about that.
Probably. I mean, I'm sure I have.
It's just interesting because, in that way, there is also some way of visualizing when somebody has actually been channeling Wetiko for so long that they actually become the full body expression of that.
Like that woman in Eugene that triggered the whole thing. Because we drove into Eugene just to check it out because we're looking up here, possibly moving up in this area. and we drove into Eugene, and we ended. I had a bad feeling initially.
Oh yeah, I have that book.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we drove initially into town, and first I got a bad feeling, and then we ended up in the center of town. There was like a tent city,
Like an Occupy kind of tent city kind of thing going
and
on.
he was interested because he was involved with Occupy down in San Francisco, so he wanted to take a picture of it.
Well, I just said, look at America falling down, you
Right.
know, and I was just going to take a picture. And this woman who was living there was on her way across the street back to her tent, and she's like, "Looks like we got a spy," or something like
She
that.
was
And she
full
just
of
started
what she-
spitting at us, just yelling at us. And I kind of, I don't know. I just sort of teased her a little bit. I started talking to her in a southern accent or something like that. I don't know what I did. Just said a few sentences that were smart ass or something. And that might have made it even worse.
Right.
And then that turned you on, and then you were just like,
Well, I
triggered
didn't
old
even
trauma from
know.
when you lived up here before.
I don't know exactly what happened, but during the rest of our trip up to Portland from then, it was like something happened, and it was like had kind of come into me, and we created this disharmonious space for a bit, and then we had the tire blowout, just like it, and it was just crazy. And
So
then,
yeah, it transfers fast now.
yeah, so we just even on this trip, we've found that of being like completely, it's so important
wow.
to be completely aware of
You know,
everything.
this one
you know?
I've never seen this one. This because I know this author. I have a book.
He shows you, he goes through
Is it good? Is it
species
good?
after species after species and shows you the dark virus Wetiko side of that species.
So it's a good book.
I'm only how far I'm through him. I started it and didn't
Wow.
finish it. Went into something else, and I picked it
Because
back up
I
again.
have Supernature.
Okay,
And,
right.
I'll order this. This is great.
Yeah.
Wow. Cool.
This reminds me, that Douglas Holstetter book that you lent me about the meme? Do you guys know that author?
The Douglas Holstetter.
Holstetter, yeah, he wrote that book called Gödel, Escher, and Bach, The Eternal Golden Braid. I actually just wrote a thing, because I think I mentioned to you I'm into music, and he mentions in that, he talks about the mind virus, but he's also written a lot about music and how Bach himself was actually this mathematician of the musical spheres that was tracking what he calls the eternal golden braid, or like these strange loops. And basically the idea that like a strange loop is something like an MC Escher painting where one hand is painting the other hand, and so you actually can't identify, like you can identify that there's two steps, right? There's one hand and two hands, and each one is drawing the other. Or you've seen the staircase where there's like 20 staircase steps, but each one of them is actually moving seemingly infinitely ascending or infinitely descending. And so,
wow, it's so genius.
There's actually a mathematical formula that's Gödel was this German mathematician who had mapped out these strange loops that happen. He says the simplest is a two-step loop, and then it can go up infinitely. But so Bach he created like these fugues, like he wrote something called the crab canon, and if you play the song forwards and backwards simultaneously, it's actually the same piece. It's like a palindrome, a musical palindrome. And yeah, he just so the whole stuff is really kind of trippy.
Wow,
and he writes all about the virus of the mind. I think he actually quotes this guy.
Oh, okay.
We should write that.
And there's
down.
that guy Colin
yeah.
Wilson also, right? Mind Parasite.
Well, that was
that's
the novel.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, this is great. I'll get this. And
You might like that because it's more. It shows you it more on like a sort of foundational, universal level of how it's not just a human disease or whatever. This is found. This
A
is
universal.
Universal. It goes down. It goes down to the atomic level. It's everywhere. It's yeah. It's
Right. And I just want to meta communicate too. So I'm also I'm going to need to go soon because I have a group tonight, and I have a lot of
no problem.
Whenever I have
no problem.
Typically,
No problem.
by 4 I'm in my practice.
You need it.
Right.
Yeah, no problem.
No, we really appreciate your
Yeah,
time.
we spent a lot of time.
Totally.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And also send me that link of that, whether it's articles or books about what you were saying about the viruses, or it was that
that BBC documentary. I will do all that.
Whatever.
Yeah.
And this is great. I mean,
yeah,
will get that.
Yeah, grab
Fantastic.
that. Yeah, you know the author already.
Yeah, totally.
And then
that
what
one
else?
I have at home. If you ever want
Do
to
you know
borrow
this
that.
one?
Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like you
This
would.
is a nice hardcover edition. Wow, that's beautiful. I have that.
Yeah, he does the like breathing technique.
Yeah, the holotropic
totally.
breath
Right,
work. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I just started.
No, he was he's been like reading my work, and then
Awesome.
I wrote him to write me an endorsement, and he never responded.
Oh,
but he
maybe
was,
he didn't get it.
Maybe, but it was cool because he was one of the people who was like following and reading my work.
Yeah, it seems like he would be.
How did you
totally.
manifest Sting?
Let me get the bill.
Reading.
Sting.
I think
Interesting.
the bill's here, and I have. I'm happy to pay my piece. I've got
Could make. Why don't you pay the tip?
Okay. Yeah. Let me actually. I'll just be right back.
Okay, Sting. It's funny how that happened. This was probably in 2005 or something.
Yeah.
Just
You asked him how that happened. Yeah.
One day, I opened up my email, and there was an email from Sting, and he's just like, "Oh, I really love your work," and
He's been on the mailing list, I guess.
Yeah, or he was, somebody had turned him on to my stuff. And so then we've been corresponding, and actually he was in my dream last night, and
Oh, wow.
we've met a few
Whoa.
times, we've hung out, and so we just correspond, and he really appreciates my work, so that's really cool. And he wrote me a beautiful endorsement
Yeah, that was
and
really
stuff.
nice.
Yeah, no, it's very nice.
Yeah.
So
I wonder
cool.
if he's going to write new music
Based
on it.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I don't know, and we'll see. But I'm just finishing up, so I'm not sure if you guys have you subscribed to my website.
We got the notice that article's on the way.
On the way, within a week. It's
Right,
like totally. I was working on it all morning.
Right.
And it's like it's really cool for me. Right when I'm like, so it's being edited as we speak.
Nice. Yeah.
And so hopefully by beginning to the middle of next week it'll be out.
Okay.
And that's it's really cool because it's just like me contemplating the creative spirit, and it's such a trippy thing to contemplate, and it necessitated me getting even just in touch with my own creative process.
Right.
Well,
And,
can I ask you how? I remember my dad told me my parents were aspiring actors, and my dad was writing back in the days, but. Related to me, I think it was a story from, I've told this a lot of times about Stephen King, how this is very well known, but for all writers and stuff, Stephen King would sit there and looking at the blank page, right, and going, okay, start, no, that's crap, and start, that's crap, or whatever, and the creative process, what it needs you to do is just, it needs you to, there's two things that you have to do. One is that you have to frustrate the process, and that is by just starting, right? And so you just have to start at some point, and even if it's junk, you just have to keep going and get into the fact that you don't like it, fine, whatever, keep trying to change it, throwing it away. At some point, through the frustration of that process, something will snap. And so the way he would do it was he would start, and stop and sleep on it, and start and stop and sleep on it, and then after the third or fourth try, then something would start to pour out. And then if the beginning stuff still wasn't good, then he'd go back later and correct the beginning after the flow started. And so I listened to that, and I sort of just noticed it's the exact same way creativity always worked for me. Is you have to, it's hardly ever going to just all of a sudden just turn on and just flow out. So you have to actually you have to try, get frustrated, this sucks, I'm walking away. Try again, get frustrated, this sucks, I'm walking away. And then at some point it will turn it on. But you have to actually start and go through that frustrating process to get the whole creative process to work. And at least his, Stephen King's explanation of how that works for him has always played out to be true for me as well. And is that the same as you guys?
Yeah. Sometimes though, like I think of like this spring. I had this. I've been in this relationship with a woman for about I don't know, not too long, like maybe 3 or 4 months, where we've been living together, and I hadn't really had any musical creativity coming through. And every time I pick it up, there was just not a lot happening. And then when she and I broke up, the moment she and I broke up, for like the next week, like every day a full song was coming out. And these are like intricate, like very like novel chord progressions, and just like really.
Oh yeah, you can. You want because we're going to be driving.
So I realized, sometimes
I
if you
wanna
create a
have it sit
dam,
down.
like if there's like all this creative energy that builds up, and then the dam breaks, and then
that's another way.
So that's another way where it can come out.
if you're jamming it up.
Yeah.
Oh, totally. I can see that
just to
happening
contribute
too.
that.
Yeah, I can see how that would work.
Yeah.
What did you do? You just took your own. You just paid for your own thing, or something?
Yeah, well,
like that?
you mentioned the tip thing, but I realized, all I have is a card, so it's just easier to do it this way.
Oh, okay. So then we'll just leave it. Just leave it tip one with yours, Mel.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Tip.
Okay, great.
So that one will be-
And so, but the last thing I can think of here to say is that this is so wonderful that we're all of us are getting into this and being understanding it cognitively and stuff, but we just keep coming back to the realization that it has to be coupled with what is with the product of your practice. I mean, it has to be coupled with a heart-based state of being, and that this has to be it has to be in life. It all is talk about the secret and consciousness awakening. You go to these events and stuff, everybody's talking about techniques and all this kind of stuff, and there's really hardly anything in there about the heart aspect. I mean, there's hardly anything there, and it's like that whole section is just missing from the equation.
Well, totally. That's important. That's the compassion.
Yeah, and I think it's like, this was so good.
Yeah, I thought when you were describing your reaction to Thai food, I thought, you would like this soup.
Crispy rice.
It's called a sizzling rice, and it's really good when you put it in the hot soup. The hot soup just sort of like softens it or something.
Okay.
It's just kind of cool. Down.
Eat that later, yeah.
Yeah.
We each have a fortune.
Oh yeah, fortune. Oh yay.
You and your divination. Just put it down.
Okay. Okay.
Did you like how he grabbed the coin and was interested in that?
Yeah,
interesting.
I almost gave it to him, actually.
No, I didn't want to.
I almost did. It served its purpose.
Mine's great.
What does mine say when
Okay.
you're done?
Well, yours says, Colin, you will soon receive a letter from a loved one.
Okay.
Mine says you will take a chance in the near future and win.
Okay.
And mine says you will enjoy doing something different this weekend.
No, nice. Okay.
I haven't opened mine yet. Let's see.
Basic.
Yeah, I'm just happy that
These-
that's
these-
like,
these-
to have a blessing on my weekend. That feels good.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah.
You will have much to be thankful for in the coming year. Oh, that's great. Okay.
Be thankful for the coming year. Okay.
Oh, that's good.
Well,
Right.
well, guys, thank you so much. This is great. I'm
Oh,
really glad.
yeah, thank you
and
so much,
Definitely
yeah.
send me, like I said.
Oh, I will.
It's great to make the connection.
Yeah.
And so you'll be getting from me within probably 5 days.
Nice.
With
Oh,
the whole
awesome.
creativity thing.
Nice.
I forgot to show you. I've decided. I just sent off today the mail to my web guy, who's just across town. I have this slide of a beautiful drawing because I'm an artist, and I chose one drawing that I'm going to have him actually embed in the article.
Oh, nice.
Because it's about the creative spirit. I figured,
Right.
why not have one of my drawings
course.
there?
Nice.
And
And Paul, maybe, or you too, Ezra, maybe you guys can think about the concept of using the comic book medium as a way to describe this process and show your own personal experiences and stuff, because we can all be characters in the comic book, and then through the story relay information.
it just
helpful.
brings up in me the idea of not just because here I've chosen the medium of writing,
Right.
But it could be comic book, could be films, or I'm just
Exactly.
into different media
Exactly.
of trying to get across. Because I was even thinking today, God, if they made, not that I would want this, but if they ever made a film of my life,
Yes.
in the sense of showing what I went through
Yes.
to show what Watiko is, I
Yes.
think it would be even more powerful
Yes.
than just the written word.
Right.
Oh, no,
Because
absolutely.
There's something about that medium.
Yeah.
I think it needs to be done. We just thought of the comic book as like the first stage of maybe a movie later, because a movie medium for this all of this information. Everybody's making documentaries now. I mean, they're just constantly coming out, great documentaries. But is there one on this? There isn't yet.
Yeah, no, that's why. I mean, seriously, one of the people who like my books, his friends, who was it with Steven Spielberg or one of the major movie people, I forget the
Your
guy's name.
life would make a great movie.
Yeah, no, but that would be like my worst nightmare type of thing. And I'm very comfortable not being openly known. But, just can you imagine if they even made, like a really good big movie about, but really trying to illustrate the just what I read about in the book, the non-locality of Watiko and how it operates through your mind. And if you think they have it, you're under the spell, and it's like, just the trippiness of it. And yet the whole thing would be like a transmission trying to illumine that this is actually, the whole movie is like in your own mind. It's actually like showing you the very thing that the movie's about.
Did you guys ever see that movie Zardoz?
Sounds
what
familiar.
is that?
That's an older movie.
Sean Connery. It was like
it was after some
of
the 007.
It's on my list,
but I never saw it. Yeah.
Well, anyway, for some reason that film came to mind.
And I thought of Memento.
Did you see
Yeah,
Memento?
I
remember that. Yeah, it's been years.
It's backwards.
It's a movie. It goes backwards, but it's like a synchronous kind of a situation going on. But absolutely, there needs to be a movie, maybe at some point.
So I'm just putting that out there because I feel like with what I'm trying to bring forth, that it's like a super kind of, whatever. It's hard for me to like talk about my own work in this way, but it's like a really important thing.
Yeah.
And I'm just like,
it's like probably one of the most important things that could be talked about in
and
our
I'm just
culture at all.
That, in the hands of people of influence or power, in the art world.
Yes.
And, that they could actually, if they really got switched on to what I'm like pointing at, then I imagine, that it could be taken to the next level of getting it out, of disseminating it more.
No, we've been sort of like just scanning just lightly, like who's out there in the movie making world. We saw what's his name, Sean Stone, the son of Oliver Stone. We saw he seems kind of awake and stuff.
Journey.
He's on his own journey.
He's also already delved like into the spirit world. Like he did this film with his friend that was almost like a pseudo documentary about this their experience with this haunted like mental institution and spirits and ghosts.
And
stuff.
it's so interesting. You saying that makes me think like, who's to say that us, having lunch today might not precipitate down the road with like, Sean Stone or a friend of his or whatever, and just all of a sudden, because all of this is part of like the dreaming.
Exactly.
And it was just so funny that you were just here, just hanging out, visiting.
Yeah, it's a good coincidence.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Maybe we can just use this as a sort of a ritual to start the process of that creation of that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be awesome. No, I really appreciate you guys taking me out for lunch. Thank you.
Oh yeah, no problem. Thank you.